Mr. Chairman.
Senator Heinrich.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out that we are at historically high production levels in this country, and certainly in New Mexico, our production on federal lands has increased markedly. The price that we are seeing at the pump is a direct result of the war in Ukraine. And since Russia invaded Ukraine, we've seen fossil fuel prices represent 41% of our entire inflationary pressure. And that doesn't count the follow-on effects of those oil and gas inflation pressures as they sort of roll through the rest of the supply chain. So I know it's very politically expedient to blame Joe Biden for the inflationary pressures that we've seen. But I think all of us bear some responsibility when we stood with Ukraine and said we are not going to buy Russian oil. And that has an impact, and we are seeing that impact. So I just think this is a little bit of an argument that is not entirely accurate, and we need to look at the whole picture.
Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the MH Dutch Salmon Greater Gila Wild and Scenic River Act. It would permanently protect some of the most spectacular river segments and streams in our country and some of the last undammed headwaters in the Colorado River watershed. This literally builds on work that goes back to 1974 when Wild and Scenic was first proposed by Congressman Runnels and Manuel Lujan, the former Republican Secretary of the Interior. It's the result of years of negotiations and advocacy ever since then. I'm happy to co-sponsor this with Senator Lujan as well, and look forward to working with you on this legislation.
Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Daines.
I have a question for Senator Heinrich.
I would be more than happy to entertain that.
All right. Mr. Chairman, and Senator Heinrich, I've worked on bills similar like this in Montana. I believe it's important for proposals like this to have strong support from the local community. Can you confirm this bill has strong local support? You talked a lot about collaboration. Yep. Talk about that.
This is really was created by the local community. It has support from county commissioners, tribal leaders, across the board. I think what is different from a few months ago when we had I would say that the area of greatest disagreement in this bill previously was a disagreement on whether or not it would impact the mining activities at the Tyrone mine. That's a Freeport-McMoRan mine in just outside of Silver City. We've been negotiating for many months to try and resolve that. It was never the intention of Senator Lujan or myself to use this legislation to impact mining activities at Tyrone. We were able to reach agreement yesterday on language that makes very clear to both Freeport-McMoRan and ourselves that wouldn't be, so they have withdrawn their opposition to this legislation, and the local community support is really incredible. It was more than 2-to-1 even before we resolved that issue. So it's been strongly supported by the local mayors and really has impressive local community support.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question for Senator Heinrich. Senator Heinrich, I know out west with the drought we've had, you hear concerns about impacts, what the kind of legislation might have on water rights and water delivery. It's a big deal, as you know and I know. My question is, what impacts would your bill have on water rights and water delivery?
Yeah, this does not change water rights whatsoever. In New Mexico, the Office of the State Engineer regulates water rights. There's no federal water management, and existing rights under this legislation would be completely unaffected, as would all existing water uses, diversions, et cetera.
Thank you.
Senator Heinrich.
Chairman, the Wildlife Livestock Conflict Resolution Act would resolve land use conflicts in New Mexico by allowing permittees to voluntarily donate their grazing permit to the BLM or the Forest Service. The bill only applies to grazing permits in New Mexico and is capped at a small number of permits per year. Permittees in New Mexico have asked me for voluntary grazing permit retirement as an option for their grazing permits, but without this legislation, they simply don't have that choice available to them. Voluntary permit retirements are an important tool to help resolve conflicts, in particular disease transmission between livestock and wildlife, and I would ask your support for this legislation.
Any further comment?